What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017, middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and whatever other insanity is coming down here. Boy, it really does feel like the whole world is just going insane, or at least all the world's leaders. And it's a very dangerous, dark time right now. People are really worried, especially here in Hawaii, obviously. We're out here in the middle of the Pacific. All right, let's get into the news here right now. First of all, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on Ian. And the political infighting in Washington is continuing, and it's not sending a very pleasant message to the rest of the world here. Special counsel Robert Mueller has hired yet another lawyer for his team to get Trump. And it's another Obama ally, Greg Andres, and apparently he started yesterday. He's the 16th lawyer on the team. And there is just no way that anybody's going to believe that this is a fair, objective, and unbiased investigation. For one thing, Robert Mueller is already in violation of the special counsel statute, first of all, because he's on a mission creep. He was appointed to look into charges of collusion between Trump and Russia. He didn't find anything, so he took it upon himself to start saying, well, we're just going to look everywhere until we find something. And that's not the way special counsels are supposed to operate. There is also a provision in the special counsel law that says anybody with a personal connection to anybody being investigated in any aspect of their work must recuse themselves, and Mueller hasn't done that either. So this is a political hatchet job. Now, have you noticed in the corporate media, after months and months of Russia, all of a sudden it's switched off. Just overnight, it's gone. And the reason for that appears to be that the story has indeed backflashed onto the Democrats and onto Hillary. The American people understand that this is a smear job. It's actually building support for Donald Trump. People are feeling sorry for him. That the government he's supposed to be in charge of is definitely on the attack against him. Now, Julian Assange has come on out and said that he has investigated through WikiLeaks both of the presidential candidates, Trump and Hillary was the only one with corrupt ties to Russia, such as the Uranium One deal, helping an American company evade the Russian sanctions to buy a Russian company, and on and on and on and on. Now, Seymour Hersh has once again come on out saying that it was Seth Rich and not the Russians who gave the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. Apparently, the indications are on Seth Rich's laptop, which is still in the hands of the police. And they had to involve the FBI to get into it. They didn't have his password. And on there, they found communications between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks, including a request for payment, because WikiLeaks will very often have a cash reward for whistleblowers. And there was no evidence of contact with the Russians on that laptop. Now, the only area where I'm not sure I agree with Seymour Hersh is he thinks Seth Rich's death is unconnected with all of this. And I think Seymour is kind of leaping to a conclusion there. Now, the good news is, remember Imran Awan's hard drives that he was trying to get back desperately? He'd smashed them all up. They came from U.S. government offices, and he smashed them all up. It turns out that technicians at the FBI are, in fact, starting to recover data. Apparently, Awan did not actually do that much damage to the actual rotors, and they're getting all this information off there, including, we are told, 30 of the Hillary Clinton emails related to Benghazi. These are previously unknown. They were never turned over as required. So that whole thing is really heating up. But that hasn't stopped the Congress from going forward with their Russian sanctions bill. And, of course, it's all based on a fairy tale. The justification for these sanctions on Russia is they tampered with the 2016 election. Don't bother us asking for us for proof. We have it as an article of faith. We just know. We got it from Miss Cleo and her crystal ball. It was on the Ouija board. The tea leaves told us. We don't need evidence. And Congress just rushes forward with a near unanimous vote to sanction Russia. Now, Trump has signed the Russian sanctions bill. He did it reluctantly, and he's out there saying this thing is seriously flawed. And he's absolutely right, but he signed it because Congress has produced a veto-proof majority, and Donald Trump does not want to go through a veto fight with Congress that he knows he's going to lose. But he's already out there tweeting, saying that this was an absolute mistake, and Congress has basically forced it down his throat. And the end result is going to be that this new sanctions law will drive China, Russia, and North Korea, and probably Iran as well, that much closer together. And he's absolutely right about that. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And Trump is still out there saying that he's hoping Russia and the U.S. can somehow resolve the issues and work back closer together. But, of course, the people inside the U.S. government, whose entire livelihood and reason for being is confrontation with Russia, they don't want to see that happen. The military-industrial complex doesn't want peace. Israel doesn't want peace. John McCain certainly doesn't want peace. Their authority, their wealth, their power is always based on war with somebody, which is why there have been so few years of peace in U.S. history. Now, the Russian Prime Minister, Dmitry Medvedev, following Trump's signing of the sanctions bill, has come on out and said the U.S. has just declared a full-scale trade war on Russia. And that's the last thing our economy needs. But the people in Washington, D.C. are going forward with these ideas without really thinking them all the way through. And they've gone from one disaster to another disaster to another disaster, and they're not learning any lessons from these mistakes, that you just don't go with a knee-jerk reaction to what sounds like a good idea on first reading. I guess I'm going to have to start drinking domestically produced vodka now. Article coming out of dailycaller.com. Punishing Russia is not worth World War III. And that's what is at risk. Now, I know the conventional wisdom inside the Pentagon is this is really a new Cold War. There'll never actually be any direct combat. We just get to take money away from everybody and build new weapons and have a lot of fun with their toys. And it's a sucker game, because that's what they did during the first Cold War. They propagandized the American people. The Russians are going to come get you. Those commies, those Soviets, they're coming to take away your life. And you got to give us your money and be ready to fight in wars. And it went on and on and on. Vast sums of money pouring into the military. And what happened to all of that stuff that was built with all that money? Well, the vast majority of it is just corroding away in the deserts of Arizona. Go on out to Google Earth and search for the Arizona boneyard sometime. You will be stunned at how many of these old Cold War bombers, fighters, everything, just been sitting there, corroding away. Huge waste of money. So getting on back to Donald Trump, it does seem like there is a continuation of the effort to get Donald Trump out of office. The corporate media hates him. Hollywood hates him. The intellectual yet idiot academia class hates him. And the CIA hates him. And so does the deep state, meaning the narcocracy. They don't trust him to keep his mouth shut when he finally realizes the tremendous amount of drug smuggling being done by various agencies of the government, including the CIA. Trump is a threat to that war machine bureaucracy who sit there at taxpayer expense and constantly think about, oh, if we go to war with Russia, we'll do this, and then maybe we'll do that. And that's all they do, war games. They are paid to play war games all day long. They don't want to give up that job. They don't want to have to go out and find real work, especially in this economy. Now, Merkel is trying to distract from problems over in her country by wagging the Russian threat. She's ordering the German troops to prepare in Georgia because of a Russian invasion. Russia is becoming a scapegoat for everything that's going wrong in the West, whether it's the banking system, manufacturing, out-of-control migrant refugees. No matter what goes wrong, we blame Russia. That's it. What's going wrong? Blame Russia. Oh, I got fingerprints all on my camera lens. Oh, that was Putin did that. The belt snapped on my dryer last night. Oh, that was definitely Vladimir Putin. He's behind all of that. No matter what goes wrong. Oh, it rained really hard today. Oh, that's Russia. They're changing the weather. They're weaponizing it. And it's a joke, and most people realize it's a joke. And I think that's the reason why the corporate media has now backed off on all of this nonsense about Russia, 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 Russia. It's not getting any traction. People are burned out by it. And the more Congress actually digs into all of this, the more they're finding that, as Julian Assange said, it was Hillary who was in bed with the Russians. Apparently, one of her associates, Sidney Blumenthal, is now in trouble. That while he was working for her, he was also working for a foreign government, but failed to register as a foreign agent. And it just goes on and on and on. Now then, let's look over at the war zones. Apparently, U.S.-backed forces, who are not being as well-backed as they were just a couple of weeks ago, basically are running away from TANF. And a big part of that has to be the dropping of that CIA support. And apparently at least 10% of the U.S.-backed forces have now defected back to the Syrian government, which tells you it was never about ideology or freedom or politics. It was a paycheck. They went where the paycheck was, and the U.S. was writing paychecks to say, get Assad for us. And it failed. Al-Nusra in eastern Damascus is on the verge of collapse right now. This thing is all but over. And the U.S. can't think of a way that they can get back in there and turn things around in a manner that the U.S. population, the general population, will sit still for. Because we're not going to sit still for it. It's nonsense. We have had too many of these regime changes. We have been lied to too many times. Saddam's nukes, Assad's sarin gas, Lusitania not carrying weapons, and on and on and on. It's how this government does business, and we are onto them. Meanwhile, Russia is continuing to build up their forces in Syria, and a reminder, Russia is in Syria at the request of the Syrian government, and with their permission. The United States is not. The United States is not wanted there. So looking at Khmeimim Air Base in Syria, satellite photos are showing a total of 33 Russian aircraft, 11 Sukhoi 24 tactical bombers, 3 Sukhoi 25 attack aircraft, 3 Sukhoi 27 strategic fighters, 6 Sukhoi 35 multi-role fighters. That's one of their latest and greatest. It's an awesome machine. 4 Sukhoi 30 fighters, and 6 Sukhoi 34 strike fighters. They are a formidable force, and of course they're providing air cover for Syria's forces against the U.S.-backed forces. Now somebody, we don't know who, fired a mortar at the Russian embassy in Damascus. Nobody was injured. Apparently 2 of the shells actually hit the building, and the other 2 missed and hit the ground. Now, over in Turkey, something's going on there. Erdogan is really cracking down on civil freedoms. And apparently Turkey is now banning concerts, hunger strikes, public gatherings and protests in Ankara. The official reason given is that all of these large gatherings of people represent attractive targets for terrorists. I somehow doubt that that is really what's going on here. Now, over in Qatar, as their economy continues to collapse, Saudi Arabia has gone back to square one and reinstated their entire list of demands and say, you will do this or we will do bad things to you. And this is actually proving to be problematic for the United States, which has that air base in Qatar, which is going to be impacted by this ongoing blockade. And that air base is the main point of power projection for the U.S. in that region. Now, so far they're continuing to operate, but at some point, it is going to start getting in the way there. Now, looking over at North Korea, we're getting mixed signals out there. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson yesterday said he hopes Washington and Pyongyang can eventually establish diplomatic discussions and ease the tensions with North Korea. This is in stark contrast to what we're getting from Donald Trump and the other war hawks about getting ready to just go on in with a preemptive bombing run to get the nukes and get the missiles. But again, people aren't falling for this idea that North Korea is a threat. North Korea is building a defensive deterrent, because North Korea sees it is the United States that is invading and regime changing all over the globe, and they don't want to be on that list. So over at Rense.com, they have an article, the North Korea problem lies in Washington, not Pyongyang. And basically saying Washington's refusal to act responsibly is the root cause of the long-standing hostility toward North Korea. And Russia, and especially China, are fed up with America or the U.S. government throwing its weight around and then trying to shove their own policy failures onto them regarding the Korean Peninsula. Remember what I said a little while ago. We're seeing too many of these policies being put out. They're not thought all the way through. They're not getting the traction with the propaganda. It turns into a mess, and they try and shove it off on somebody else. And that's what's going on with Russia and China, with Trump saying that Russia and China have to deal with this mess. And Russia and China are saying, it's your mess. You escalated this thing. You turned it into a crisis. You deal with it. Ron Paul is out there asking a very valid question. Who will Trump attack first, North Korea or Iran? Or maybe both. Article coming out of Alternet saying that the war with Iran is now on the timetable, and it's scheduled for October. Now, we know the last time that Trump looked at the P5+1, he wanted to say that Iran was not in compliance, even though the IAEA had certified that they are. And at the last second, Trump went along with recertifying the P5+1, then immediately hit Iran with sanctions. And Iran is now up at the United Nations saying these new sanctions basically violate that P5+1 deal. So what's going on is that Donald Trump, to please his good buddy Bibi Netanyahu, is looking for some way to force Iran to back off the deal, because they want Iran to be the bad guy. And then the war will be on. So apparently Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Shamkhani, is saying there's a U.S. plot to destroy the P5+1 deal in order to open the door for war with Iran. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. We're going to take a phone call now. Terry in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, yesterday you said you'd like to go to the Holy Land, but as soon as you got off the airplane, you'd probably be hit, you and your wife. And I was just wondering, I have been wondering, have you had been under any threats at all over in this country?
Not for a while. They gave up a long time ago. They figured out it was just, annoying me and making me work that much harder.
But you're also under attack, like electronic attack.
Yeah,
on your,
that's still
website.
ongoing. They're after my server on a regular basis.
Okay, I also agree with that caller that called in and said make 1 point and then make room for somebody else. So I'm going to let you go. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, getting on back to the news here. The other day, Iran inaugurated their scientific space launch facility. They launched a small satellite into orbit, and I cracked a joke about how the United States was going to start screaming, "It's a threat! It's a threat!" They're getting ready to bomb us. And I should stop making jokes like that because I'm obviously giving people ideas. Because sure enough, over at the Associated Press, they have an article. The U.S. and allies call Iran's recent rocket launch threatening. Ooh, it's a threat that Iran can launch satellites into orbit. And they're basically saying that Iran launching satellites into orbit is inconsistent with the UN resolution endorsing the 2015 agreement to rein in its nuclear program. Now, how is being able to launch satellites into orbit in any way connected with Iran's non-existent nuclear program? I mean, look at all the other countries that regularly launch satellites into orbit. In fact, it's getting very crowded up there. It's a big problem. The United States, the European Space Agency, Russia, India, Pakistan, Japan, China, they're launching rockets into orbit all the time. Nobody ever says it's provocative. It's only provocative when Iran does it. So, yeah, this is part of the propaganda run-up to demonize Iran. And I'd like to remind everybody one more time that Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another nation in over 200 years, and certainly not since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, where they kicked out their U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. Ron Paul is out there with another warning, saying that they're not going to be able to control this. Once shots are being traded, once the artillery uncorks, it's going to spin out of control and millions could die in these wars. And that's really what's going on. And maybe that's a reason we're seeing statements at cross purposes coming out of the White House and the State Department. Maybe there's a growing number of people within the government who are all of a sudden waking up and realizing this isn't just politics and it isn't just rhetoric. We are dangerously close to a real shooting nuclear war. And it's not funny anymore. It's not a joke. It's not a game. Now, over in Iraq, another stunning U.S. foreign policy success, 3,799 were killed during the month of July. The Kurds are saying the casualties are actually much higher than that, but even 3,799 is more than enough. Apparently, the Saudis are now blocking the fuel for United Nations aid flights into Yemen. Humanitarian relief flights are now being blocked by Saudi Arabia. That constitutes a war crime under international law. So, the standoff between China and India is still heating up. China Ministry of Defense official warns India, leave Chinese land or face war. And I finally found out what this is all about. It's a right-of-way for a road. That's it, just a road. And apparently the people in India were building this road, and it's just a hair over the border, and China is ready to start shooting over this thing. If I were running China, I'd call up the head of India and say, all right, we'll move our border a little bit. We're talking, what, 2-3 acres at most? What a ridiculous reason to go to war. We'll be right back after these commercials. Okay, welcome back to our show. I'm going to back up here to the domestic political infighting because there's all kinds of breaking news. It's coming so fast you can't stay on top of it. Apparently, according to The Atlantic, National Security Council official Rich Higgins, who's a member of the nationalist faction of the White House, has been fired for writing a memo outlining the deep state threats facing Donald Trump. So there literally is a war going on inside our White House. And apparently Judicial Watch has uncovered more emails confirming that Huma Abedin was sending classified information through non-secure channels. It's a Title 18 violation. And they uncovered another 91 Clinton email exchanges not turned over to the State Department. And the corporate media will not touch this because they all love Hillary Clinton. Actually, they're all scared of her is what's going on here. All right, let's get back onto the whole war zone issue. Venezuela is unfortunately undergoing a U.S. regime change, and we know it because last week the head of the CIA admitted what's been happening in Venezuela is a U.S.-backed coup d'etat, a regime change to get Maduro out and put in a government that is friendly to U.S. corporate interests, private central banking, big oil, and so forth and so on. And the so-called opposition in Venezuela is not pro-democracy, it's pro-Washington, because Maduro was elected. They do have a democracy down there. And by the way, when you look at all these regime changes that are going on, where the U.S. says they're bringing in democracy, they're inevitably outing a democratically elected leader and putting in a tyrant. Iran in 1953, the CIA booted out democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh, and they put in the Shah. Chile in 1973. They kicked out the democratically elected Allende, and they put in the dictator Pinochet. It's a repeating, constant pattern. The political opposition inside Venezuela are pro-U.S. It's got nothing to do with democracy. It's all about the money. Now, the U.S. corporate media is trying to make a big deal that this referendum that was just held to form this National Constituent Assembly is a power grab by Maduro, and it was evil and was wrong for him to do. Actually, the ability to do that is provided for under the Venezuelan Constitution, Article 347. The people of Venezuela are the holders of the original constitutional power. In the exercise of this power, the people can call a National Constituent Assembly with the objective of transforming the state. It's their equivalent of a constitutional convention. Now, the problem was the opposition, the pro-Americans in Venezuela, in the National Assembly, were blockading Maduro's every move the way the Democrats are doing to Donald Trump in the Congress. He wasn't able to accomplish anything. And so basically they put out this idea it was time for a National Constituent Assembly to basically restart the government. And it's within the law of the land. It's not a mad power grab. And like I said, the head of the CIA admitted last week what's going on in Venezuela is another covert regime change, although it's not really all that covert because we've learned to recognize the signs here. Now, as you know, the U.S. has come under serious criticism for all the civilian deaths that are part of the drone strike program. And a lot of it has to do with very reckless targeting. And Peter Kuznick, who's a leading political analyst, says the United States has found a way to reduce the number of civilian casualties associated with the drone strikes, which sounds like a really good thing until you look at the actual solution. The U.S. government is now declaring that any male of military age is assumed to be a militant and worthy of execution. No, that wasn't a civilian. That was a male of military age. It had to, had to be a militant. I think that's called profiling. Anyway. A very telling incident just happened over at the State Department. Secretary of State Tillerson has rewritten the mission statement of the State Department, And it now reads, "We promote the security, prosperity, and interests of the American people globally. The State Department will strive to lead America's foreign policy through global advocacy, action, and assistance to shape a safer, more prosperous world," which sounds pretty high until you read between the lines and say, we're all about power projection. Now, the State Department's mission statement from 2016 read, "Their purpose is shaping and sustaining a peaceful, prosperous, just, and democratic world and fostering conditions for stability and progress for the benefit of the American people and people everywhere." So what vanished in the new mission statement? Concern for people outside the United States and any mention of democracy whatsoever. Very telling here. All right, let's get on to the economic news here because things are not very good. We're seeing the U.S. dollar in a major decline against other world currencies. And apparently it's down about 9%, courtesy of Bianco Research. And it appears the U.S. dollar is tracing its performance from back in 1985 quite closely. And 1985 was the worst year for the U.S. dollar in 40 years. So they're saying unless something changes, expect the U.S. dollar to lose another 10% of its value from here on out to the end of the year. The U.S. dollar is declining against the euro. It's lost about 4 cents on the exchange rate, which may not sound like much, but year after year after year, it's whittling it away. Over in Germany, Deutsche Bank has issued a warning on the German economy saying that it's actually at risk of overheating and burning out. And they're pointing the finger of blame at deceptive indicators that mask worrying threats. In other words, yeah, they're polishing it over to fool their people just the way our government is doing the same thing here. Now, Deutsche Bank said the Eurozone's largest economy has outperformed in recent years, but the trend is deceptive and could come to an abrupt halt. There's a stark danger behind indicators that show strong employment, wage, and economy growth, said the bank. So Merkel's dealing with that issue as well. They have another problem, and that is the German auto industry is in serious, serious trouble. Now, part of that is the same reason all auto industries all over the world are in trouble. People don't have the money to buy the cars. I mean, if you look at the TV commercials by automakers and dealerships right now, you can look at those prices and say, wow, this would be a great time to buy a car if I actually had any money with which to buy the car. Germany's facing another problem, and that is the large number of German automakers whose reputations have been destroyed with all these scandals about rigging the emissions standards by cheating the software on the cars. So the cars have one set of settings when they think they're being measured for emissions and another set entirely when they're actually being driven on the road. And the German auto industry is a part of Germany's national pride. And so there are going to be all kinds of after effects of this. Now, here in the United States of America, we're seeing more and more states looking to financially break away from the federal government, more to the point, the Federal Reserve. And as you know, the state of Utah passed a legal tender act earlier this year authorizing the use of gold and silver coins as money within the state of Utah. Other legislators in other states are now looking at similar legislation. And that means the United States is approaching a constitutional crisis because states are breaking financially away from the central government. This is no less serious than the War of Independence, which was all about an honest money system versus private central banking. And it looks like there may be a major confrontation where the federal government is going to come on in and mandate the use of the Federal Reserve note. Now, when I was a kid, if you had a Federal Reserve note, it would say right on the front, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and can be traded for money at your local bank, meaning that piece of paper and ink was a claim check only. because the money was the metallic content of the coins. And you could walk into a bank, present the claim check, and they would give you the coinage, which was the money. Then, following John F. Kennedy's assassination, it simply changed. They took out the part about being able to redeem for money at the bank, because they want you to think that piece of paper and ink is the money. And it says, this note is legal tender for all debts public and private. What is not on there yet is the word only. That may be about to arrive, where it'll say this note is the only legal tender for all debts public and private. Because the Federal Reserve wants all alternative monetary systems to just go away. They want Bitcoin to go away. They want locally produced trade currencies to go away. They want any alternative source of medium of exchange to be banished, to make us all dependent on them, just as King George III made the American colonies dependent on the Bank of England, which led to the American Revolution. Now, Max Slabo is out there pointing out something that we commented on, I think, about a week ago. Donald Trump, I mean, the stock market is being run on up, and they're saying, will it cross 23,000? And they got the cheerleaders out there saying, oh, yes, you know, higher, higher. And when they treat the stock market numbers like a sporting event, you know we're in big, big trouble. And unfortunately, Donald Trump has made a critical mistake. He's trying to take credit for the stock market bubble. Yes, I'm doing a great job. The stock market is at brand new heights here. And he's setting himself up because sooner or later that bubble is going to pop. It's showing all the hallmarks of the crash of 2008. Might even be a lot worse. And of course, having taken credit for the stock market on the way up, he will be blamed for it as it comes crashing back down. And again, it's not his fault. History blames Herbert Hoover for the Depression of the 1930s, but Herbert Hoover did not create that depression. It was created for him. And Donald Trump has inherited decades of financial mismanagement and unsustainable economic policies centered around that private central bank that by design creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the system locks up. Now, as part of his pressure on China for China to take on solving the U.S.-created crisis with North Korea, Trump is getting ready to retaliate to China's unfair trade practices. Oh, yes, we're going to have a trade war with China now. And China's going to be laughing their heads off saying, all right, let's see you put some kind of product in those big box stores now. It's a reckless, insane behavior here. Now, over in the European Union, Hans Olaf Henkel, he's vice president of the European Parliament's third largest group, the European Conservatives and Reformists, has gone on the warpath against Brussels for allowing the Italian banks to be bailed out to save the euro, saying that the EU is openly breaking their own rules, trying to salvage the crumbling Eurozone. And yes, all collapsing empires, banks, corporations, they start playing fast and loose with the rules, and they figure, it's only temporary. We'll make it good after things are better, but they never do get better. I would be very surprised if the EU were still intact by the end of the year. ZeroHedge.com is reporting that manufacturing loses the most jobs since Trump's election as ADP employment growth weakens. And you had April and June, very disappointing ADP reports, basically saying the U.S. economy added 178,000 jobs, less than what was expected. And again, it's service jobs are accounting for the vast majority of these, but more and more companies are starting to look at automation for service jobs. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Francis in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you.
Aloha, Nunu.
I tell you what. Well, actually to you both, anyway. when they initially my first thought was about the currency issue and so forth. However, if they want to go and attack Iran, okay, enough's enough of the, shall we say, horse manure. This is getting to be absurd to start with. As far as the currency goes, if the banks are just wanting people to just simply use the Federal Reserve note as far as their cash is concerned, all well and great, whatever. But the problem is, how do they contend with that when people are swiping their plastic cards with a microchip shoved up their leash?
Well, the plastic cards are denominated basically as Federal Reserve notes, the U.S. dollar. It's just a different form of it. But the reason the Federal Reserve wants us all using the Federal Reserve dollar, whether it's plastic card, paper, numbers in a computer, is because it accrues interest to the Federal Reserve.
Oh, there's that.
Yeah, that's it. That's how they're bleeding the wealth out of the American people and putting it in their pocket. And that's exactly what happened when King George III passed his Currency Act, which forbade the colonies from issuing their own honest money system and said you will conduct all business using banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England. And it took only a few years to reduce the prosperous colonies to the same poverty and deprivation you saw in England of the same period. And if you've read the writings of Charles Dickens or the conditions during the time of Jack the Ripper, you will understand that that poverty was not by accident. It was an artifact of that private central bank.
True. Now, to stir the pot even more, a lot of people are going to think, well, what do you expect to pay for your goods by if you end up having an action in the U.S. similar to what the people did in Iceland, where they basically took the international bankers and kicked them out, or better yet, put them in jail?
Well, they reformed the monetary system, but the monetary unit of exchange remained the same. It's a complicated issue, but Iceland survived it very well, although now they're back in trouble again. It looks like somebody declared economic war on them. Have to let you go, Francis. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the economic news here. HSBC, which you will remember is the bank that got caught laundering drug money, and Loretta Lynch gave them a wrist slap as U.S. Attorney for New York. And former FBI Director James Comey was actually on their board of directors while the drug money laundering was going on. Those guys. Okay. Apparently, they are having to cut 10,000 jobs. Their revenues have dropped 11%. I guess it's hard to get by without that drug money. Meanwhile, executives are launching a $2 billion share buyback scheme in order to be able to boost executive compensation. Meaning, even though HSBC is losing money and losing value, they're going to pound on the workers, fire 10,000 of them, but the bosses are going to get a raise. Boy, it must be good to be a corporate executive here. Now, Commerce Bank has announced a $954 million loss, almost $1 billion. They're going to be axing 9,600 employees. So the banks are now in serious, serious trouble. And you know what's going to happen. They're going to be screaming, we need a bailout. We have to have a bailout. The banks are important. The planet can't exist without banks, which we all know is a lie. Human beings have been around planet Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. Banking only a few hundred. Now, there's concern over Venezuela defaulting on their debts. They've got billions in debt coming due soon. And, of course, with the current U.S. sanctions on oil, they're probably not going to be able to make it. And their economy is in a free fall. The bolivar has lost a third of its value just in the last week. It's economic warfare. Putting a blockade on Venezuelan oil was basically shoving the knife in and twisting it. Now, getting on back to Obamacare and the GOP, especially McCain, that is so eager to block Trump's agenda that they're going to destroy their own chance to hold on to the Senate next year. Obamacare, the new premiums are coming on out. And they're going to be double-digit increases, probably about 30% for Obamacare plans in 2018. 30%, one-third more. And it really doesn't work. And the American people are very angry at those members of Congress who blocked the repeal. And they want to know why Congress isn't listening to the American people on this issue. For most Americans, the so-called Affordable Care Act is worse than no health coverage at all. Because there's no health care, no coverage, you're $400 poorer each month for the privilege because of those sky-high deductibles. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. It's hour number 2 of our program for those who are listening to the podcast and trying to keep from being confused here. And we're finishing up here on the economic news. Ron Rosen is out there forecasting that the dollar and equities, meaning the stock market, are going to plunge together while gold spikes. And we obviously know that at some point people are going to stop listening to all this talk about the sky-high stock market numbers and realize it is a bubble. And the law of gravity is going to be very unforgiving. The corporate media is cheering how high the Dow got in the record territory. And what they're not reporting is the stock market is overvalued. Now, in a normal, healthy, functioning stock market, the price of the stock is supposed to represent its actual earnings. There's supposed to be a PE ratio, which on a healthy stock is usually around 15, 16. Some of the stocks that are out there leading this rush into the stratosphere have PEs of something like 30, 35, 40. That's unsustainable. And it's really up there. And we know that the price of gold is still being manipulated with those paper contracts. The money junkies are desperate to keep you in your savings accounts where they can get at your money, or in the stock market where you may wind up losing all your money. They don't want you in silver or gold or any other metal where you can actually have it under your own control. My goodness, that's just not the way the world is supposed to work. The bankers want to own all the money and then rent it to you. That's basically the whole rationale behind Federal Reserve, private central banking. We own all the money. You have no money that you own. We are renting it to you. Over in Great Britain, unsecured credit continues to surge. All of a sudden, they're waking up and realize they've got a huge debt crisis. In Great Britain, as in so many other parts of the world, including right here in the United States of America, people are being forced to resort to their credit cards, credit lines, borrowing, just to survive. Because this whole pyramid economy perpetuates only as long as a whole bunch of new borrowers can be brought on in to allow the creation of new money, part of which is used to pay the interest on the old money. But like any pyramid or Ponzi scheme, sooner or later you run out of new people to bring into it. I mean, it's amazing. Every day I go to the mailbox, there's 3 or 4 offers from credit card companies. You're pre-approved. I don't care. You're going in the shredder. Now, interestingly enough, there's always been one stock that is a strong, reliable investment. A lot of people don't like to invest in it because of its negative social connotations, but that's tobacco products. And they consistently outperform all other areas of endeavor. And even during severe financial times, the tobacco stocks are doing really, really well. Well, tobacco stocks got hammered last Friday, 19% drop in a single day. when the FDA came on out and announced they were going to mandate nicotine levels in cigarettes are going to be lowered to what the FDA has decided is a non-addictive level, which there really isn't any such thing. But obviously the idea that tobacco is addictive is part of their business model. Now, there's a wonderful movie that's out there. It's been out for a while. It's an early Russell Crowe film called The Insider that talks about this tobacco executive who basically went public and said, yes, the tobacco companies are intentionally tinkering with the cigarettes to make them more addictive. And it was a big stink, and the heads of all the tobacco companies went before Congress and swore under oath that nicotine was not addictive. And then they came after the guy, tried to get him thrown in jail, tried to discredit him. He wound up working as a science teacher. Cost him his family, too. These CEO types, they play for keeps. All right, let's take a phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, now that you mention it, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. Now that you mentioned about the cigarettes, I don't think that's going to happen. I think what they want to do is they just want you to buy twice as many cigarettes. That's all will happen. People will just buy twice as much to get the nicotine. But I think people have had enough of this kind of crap, and I don't think it's going to go through. About the stock market, Mike, somebody once called in to a show where Eustace Mullins was the guest, and the caller said, Eustace, how long can they keep this stock market bubble going? How long can they keep this shell going? And Eustace said, as long as they got the shell. And I think the days of the crashing stock market are over. It's just too hot. It's too much of a problem. I think it's no. They got in 2008 when everything got wiped out. It created a lot of anti-Semitism. Believe me, you don't know what you don't know. When I lived in Nevada, you could tell in the people. And I think this is something that if it comes down, it'll come down gradually. But this is my opinion. That the day of that thing crashing, like everybody thinks it's going to crash, I don't think it's going to happen. They control it. They're the ones that control the buy and sell orders, and so unless your brother who owns stock in a mutual fund calls up his broker and says, sell me out now, they'll just let it gradually go down. And that's my opinion, and that's all I've got today. Thank you for taking my call.
All right. Thank you very much for the call. I mean, if you go back and you look at all the major crashes that have occurred, 1929, 2008, just weeks or months before, there was some economic expert that said the days of stock market crashes are over, and then they had it. It's one of the most famous of the famous last words that are out there. And yes, only last month Yellen was saying exactly the same thing. We don't need to ever worry about a market decline again. But to go on back to what happened, for example, in 1929, it was all of the American people who were invested in the market. They did call their brokers and said, sell me out, liquidate my position. And at that point, the people who are at the brokerages can't do a thing about it. They have to basically follow those orders. So in point of fact, that they have the shell, that they have all this influence, is why they're able to delay and delay and delay and delay. But sooner or later, the real world is going to catch up. And we have a lot of top economic experts right now saying this bubble is going to burst. They can't hold it together much longer. And when the American people realize the extent to which they've been lied to by the government about the unemployment numbers, the inflation rate, they're going to be very, very angry. Claire and I were at the supermarket just the other day, and we are just seeing food prices just spike. They are heading up. And when the U.S. government calculates the rate of inflation, one of the things they don't take in there is the cost of food, because that's where inflation really starts to show up first. It's the state of the economy is a well-crafted illusion at this point. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. Now, Donald Trump has managed to anger nationalists all over the world and the Scottish people as well, saying that Scottish independence would be terrible, and is urging against a second referendum. Trump is saying the EU is very protectionist, which they are. And that sounds like an attempt to revive the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And we're hearing, again, there's a renewed effort to get these treaties going forward before the situation in the United States deteriorates anymore. And, of course, the fact that Trump is out there throwing sanctions at everybody, sanctions at Russia, sanctions at Iran, sanctions at North Korea. Now they're talking a trade war with China. Our economy does not have the resilience to survive this. It just doesn't. Okay. Now then, getting on to immigration. Yesterday we were talking about this new program down in Texas that is going to be using local law enforcement to carry out the functions of immigration and control. And apparently 18 Texas sheriffs have now signed up for this new program that gives them authority under the ICE. Now, I'm a little concerned about blurring the line between state law enforcement and federal law enforcement. But on the other hand, all these states with their sanctuary cities kind of brought it on themselves. And again, I think all these mayors and governors and everybody else who's out there saying sanctuary and we're not going to let these people be deported, they need to be arrested under Title VIII. It is a crime to give any assistance, food, money, transportation, housing, employment to somebody who is not legally entitled to be here. And the penalties can be very, very stiff. And when you multiply it across the hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants that are being harbored by these politicians, we're talking life in prison. Donald Trump has to get free of that swamp that's trying to eat him right now, and he's got to go out and start enforcing the existing laws. We don't need new laws. We need to enforce the existing immigration laws. Now, they do have a new law out there. It's called the RAISE Act. And it is an attempt to cut the legal immigration in half based on a meritocracy system. And I'm fully in agreement with this. Legal immigrants will be brought into the country, allowed into the country based on their skills and whether or not they can speak English. Because these are people who will be a benefit to our society rather than a burden. And this bill is modeled after other merit-based systems like they have in Canada and Australia. And I'm sure the open borders people are going to be out there screaming, it's racist, forcing these people to speak English just because they come here. English is the language here. Teddy Roosevelt nailed it right on the head. If you are an immigrant and you want to come here, welcome, but just understand you are now living in the United States of America. We have one flag, the American flag. We have one language, that's English. We have a set of laws that you will comply with. You don't come on in here and demand that we start turning into the country you just left. If you really liked it better in your home country, why did you leave in the first place? Now, yet another wedge that's being driven into the heart of the European Union. Poland is getting more and more defiant in general, and they're defying an EU court. They're basically cutting trees in the last primeval forest in Europe. And I understand people are very concerned about preserving that last primeval forest. But in this case, Poland just seems to have lost all patience with Brussels. In fact, I'm getting a sense that all over the world, all the various nations and all the various people are just getting sick and tired of all this globalist nonsense, all of this intense over-regulation of every aspect of our lives. Certainly the rest of the world is getting sick and tired of the U.S. government's tendency to throw their weight around and act like they're king of the world, when very obviously the unipolar world has collapsed already. And we have to deal with the reality of a multipolar world again. A falling United States of America alongside a rising Russia and a rising China. Now, here's an article. The leader of the People's Democratic Republic of Donetsk, Alexander Zarkachenko, is basically saying they should impose the death penalty for corruption. Boy, is there an idea whose time has come. Now, I'm not a big fan of the death penalty in general because it gets misapplied so much on ordinary civilians. But if you're talking about government officials who are proven to be corrupt, yeah, I'm having a hard time finding a problem with this one. Now then, there's been another one of these horrific stories regarding police brutality, and this one is just so over the top. I was kind of wondering if it was somebody's idea of a joke. But apparently Change.org is behind this. The NAACP is behind this. And it has to do with an incident out in Bakersfield. And it involved a 19-year-old black girl, Tatiana Hargrove, who was basically riding her bicycle home. And she saw a whole bunch of police cars and an officer. And the officer just drew his gun and pointed it at her. And they asked if she was just at a grocery store where earlier that day there had been an incident of violence. And she said no, she wasn't at the store. The police demanded to see her backpack. And they just grabbed her backpack, pinned her by her wrist, put her on the ground, sicked a canine dog on her. She wound up in the hospital. And here is the part that you really need to pay attention to. The suspect the police were supposed to be looking for was a 30-year-old black male, nearly 6 feet tall, with a shaved head and a goatee, weighing 160 pounds. Tatiana is 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighs 120 pounds, does not have a goatee, and has a full head of hair. And all of this brutality was taking place, and not one of those cops ever said, hang on a minute, I don't think this person matches the description of the suspect. This is just so over the top, it's impossible to comprehend what's going on inside the minds of these cops. Are they all on prescription antidepressants? As far as I can see, that's the only thing that explains this. Any sane person would have to look at that young girl and realize this is not the suspect we were told to be looking out for. And they put her in the hospital. It is absurd in the extreme. And it's getting even worse. Apparently Maria Rolt, who is a self-described hardcore feminist, BLM supporter, and LGBTQ plus rights advocate, wrote this piece attacking white males and just uncorked on them. And just ranted and raved about how all the injustice in the world is all the fault of white males. White males are responsible for this. White males are responsible for that. Forgetting the abuses in Zimbabwe were by a black government against a white population. But that doesn't really matter. She's a feminist and a liberal. Don't confuse her with the actual facts. But she basically came on out and advocating, saying that white males should be denied the right to vote. And then trying to make a case saying that barring white males from voting should not be considered a wrong thing. That it would actually be good for white males to understand systemic injustice and help them become better, more empathetic allies to the social justice cause. Well, what she's advocating is racism in reverse, and she's sounding dangerously like those militant feminists back in the 1990s who responded to the epic amount of false claims of rape by feminists against men, some of whom were unjustly jailed, by saying that being accused of rape, even if you hadn't done it, it was a good thing to go through that experience. It would make you more sensitive to what women are feeling. Now, folks, you do not cure racism by being racist in reverse. You do not cure injustice by being unjust. This is just another ranting liberal out there, unwilling to accept her own life's decisions and looking for somebody to blame. And right now, white males seem to be the fashionable target for all of this. We're going to take a break for commercials. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Call on in. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, to go along with that zero accountability with the police department, I can give you a little example what happened here in my little area of the woods in Northern California, where our CAL FIRE plane was returning back from a fire up there, I guess, towards Clear Lake, and nobody's been accountable for this, but they've decided to open up their doors and let about 100 gallons of fire retardant cover my neighborhood. They hit 9 houses, a bunch of cars, and yet nobody has been answering the question how this happened. And we have a neighborhood, part of the neighborhood's painted red right now.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a lack of accountability. Now, my concern would be what is in that fire retardant and how toxic is it?
Well, that's funny that you mention that, because our local paper here, trying to put lipstick on the pig and make it not seem so bad, it said, it actually was quoted as saying, mostly non-toxic.
Mostly.
Fire retardant.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly. It's kind of like they're trying to compare it to the half glass full or half empty, or partly cloudy or partly sunny, but this doesn't play in the same category. Mostly non-toxic. They wouldn't allow it to be washed down the drains and to get in our sewer system, and as far as I know, they're waiting for the sun to kind of bleach it out.
Yeah, well, you know, if you look at rat poison, it's mostly harmless. It's 95% good food. It's that other 5% you got to worry about.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that, again, the non-accountability of our local here, that they just, you know, if I did this in my plane, the FAA would be meeting with me, probably yank my license, I'd probably get a huge fine, but if government does it, they kind of walk away and just say, oops, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that should not be happening in a republic. We're supposed to be a nation of laws that everybody abides by. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for the update, Steve. And we're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Haven't called in for a while, but I listen every day. And I just really appreciate what you do. I know you don't like that, you know, those accolades, but, you know, I think just...
It strains my humble.
Along with you're the best, bro. You really are. You're you know, voice in the wilderness of, you know, truth. You know, and I won't stay on the line long, because I mean, you know, along with the caller that was right the other day and asked one question. I don't really have a question, just a comment, and that if somebody can go online and just look at how many innocent people this country has murdered, and I think it's 30 million.
Yes.
Maybe conservative. And my question to you is, and you're very accurate, you bring up the Nuremberg trials, and there's no excuse for that. When those guys are flying sorties and wiping out families and wedding parties, whatever, and I got family in the military. I was never in the military. My father was. He helped liberate the concentration camps. You can believe that.
Yes.
My mother was an English bride when he was stationed in England. I'm a product of World War II. And I was never in the military, but, you know, and it's not really a question. Just, it's so out there that you can't hardly grasp it, that this country is murdered more innocent people, and you're one of the few people that bring that out. And my question is not even a question. It's just to get your, I don't know, it's just so frustrating that we can blame, you know, we can bring up the Nuremberg trials and there's no excuse, you know, for taking orders for killing innocent people. How can these people in the military bomb these innocent not Palestinians, but whoever?
The Syrians, well, yeah, anybody in the gun sight. Well, obviously the military looks for and cultivates people who are willing to do these things. Anybody with a strong moral sense is going to wind up peeling potatoes for the entire term of their enlistment. And, of course, part of the military training is a lot of indoctrination to convince you that, yes, it's okay to do this sort of thing. And that kind of brainwashing is nothing new. Those people who helped the witch hunters in Europe burn people at the stake actually thought they were doing the victims a favor by smoothing and easing their way into hell. And so they thought they were doing a good thing. People can be made to believe almost any stupid thing, and from that they will commit any atrocity. Mo, we're going to let you go and take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Doing fine.
I sent you another email. With a couple of graphs. The correlation is astounding. One shows the trade deficits between the United States and the rest of the world, and another one shows the budget deficits, the federal government budget deficits. And it's a very important thing because it all ties in to basically the decline of the United States. And if you include all these wars that have been, basically bought and paid for on a credit card, it's easy to understand all of the hardship that the people of your country are going through, whether it be, police brutality, poverty, poor health. You have great health care, just no one can afford it. But
actually, we can't afford it, but it's lousy health care. It ranks worst of all developed nations.
Well, I know a lot of people from Canada go down to the United States for immediate health care services, for whatever it is, because the wait is so long up here for various things. Well, what am I saying? For all things, and I'm a victim of one of those. So, basically the goose that laid the golden egg is dying, and no one in the world seems to care. They just don't care.
No, they're all looking at their own little empire. They're looking at their own stock portfolio. Everybody's taking care of their own agenda, and nobody's really maintaining an overview, a wide view, a long view of the nation as a whole. And if nobody else, that should be the job of the President of the United States of America, but they've got Donald Trump totally corralled. They've got him on the defensive with all these investigations going on, and he cannot do the job. And there is a very alarming lack of any foresight in any of these policies. It's all being driven by the immediate necessity, and I think we went past the point of no return a long, long time ago. The system cannot be repaired. We're going to have to just let it implode and start all over from scratch.
Probably, Mike. I mean, they gave him that bill that was, like you said, it was veto-proof. I mean, he had no room at all to negotiate anything whatsoever. So, I mean, basically, who is the dictator here? Because it's obviously not the people of the United States, and it's obviously not Donald Trump. Who exactly is the dictator? I mean, these people have some of these congressmen have been in power for so long, and it's like you said with McCain the other day. How do these people get how does anyone watch a video with Nancy Pelosi and honestly say, you know what, I want to reelect her, or Maxine Waters? I mean, these people are just outrageous. They're comedy characters. It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting.
You're absolutely right.
It is sad.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But again, I did get your charts. In fact, I got them over the last commercial break, and I sent you a reply about one of them. But it does paint a very alarming but nonetheless accurate picture. The United States trade deficit is just completely out of control. We're importing so much that we need because we've given up on our own independence, our ability to grow our own food, manufacture our own products, and yet what we are growing, GMO crops and poorly manufactured, very expensive items, nobody else in the world wants to buy them. And that trade deficit has been driving the nation further and further into debt, along with this out-of-control government borrowing for all these wars. And, yeah, you look at that and realize there has to be a point at which the system breaks apart. And I disagree with that caller that there are going to be no more stock market crashes, that they've got it under control. No, if you look at these charts, you realize they've lost control. They have absolutely lost control of the system, again, because everybody was just looking out for themselves and nobody was actually doing any planning in terms of what was good for the nation as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, apparently Apple, had a good quarter, whoop-de-doo, and that's driving the stock market. Please, there are so many other companies out there that are basically, you talked about this before. They've been buying back their own shares, trying to drive up their stock market price. At the same time, they're not investing in R&D. So, we know what's going to happen. We know what's coming down the road. And I live in Canada, and I know exactly what's coming. If the United States continues to decline, Canada will decline too. It's a natural progression. It has to happen. There's no other way around it. This free trade deal that we trying to get going with Europe is going to be one-sided because we already have a trade deficit with Europe as a whole. We already have a trade deficit with China. You can't compete with China. You can't. Canada can't compete with China. The United States can't compete with China. We don't have the low wages. We don't have a total disregard for our people. We actually have labor laws in these countries to deal with because we are a quote unquote civilized society.
Well, now one of the hang on. That's a drastic oversimplification of what's going on over there in China. For one thing, if you look at Chinese pay over there, CEOs of companies make maybe 10 times what their ordinary workers do. Here in the United States, CEOs are making 700, 800 times what the workers do. That's why we can't compete with China, because China isn't sucking the wealth out of the product line and manufacturing and R&D to allow their CEOs to live like royalty. And our entire system has become corrupted by the money junkies, and everybody wants to be a money junkie, and it's very much out of balance, and it's unstable. And we can't continue this way, where we have this tiny group of individuals who are just grabbing all the wealth for themselves. At this point, I think all of these CEOs and bankers and Wall Street and everybody, they understand it's going to fall apart in the near future, and their attitude is, I'm going to grab everything I can while I still can, and when it all falls apart, I'm going to head for the Caymans.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But how long down the road before, the CEOs of these companies in China start saying, hey, you know what, we can make a lot of money too. It's a natural progression. It's happening up in Canada. It's happening all over the world. And, I don't know how to stop it.
Well,
I think when say that, but we're just one people, right?
I think when the U.S. comes crashing down, the rest of the world is going to look at it and say, yeah, these overpriced CEOs, that was a big part of the problem, and we're going to move to limit that. And so I'm sorry that Canada is starting to see the same thing, but I don't see it as a natural progression. I think pretty much everybody understands for an economy to be functioning, there has to be balance. There has to be the free flow of currency at all levels of society into all areas of necessary economic development, and not just this giant suction machine grabbing everything for the people to very, very top. We've become a very, very decadent society.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, Canada's not far behind. I mean,
we're turning into third world banana republics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Actually,
I even have bananas growing out back.
Better off. Apparently, your country has gold. We have none up here. We've given it all away or sold it, whatever they do with it. Anyway, I appreciate your time, Mike. Your show's great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Al. We're going to let you go here. We don't actually know how much gold the U.S. has. It's been over half a century since anybody actually did a real audit of Fort Knox. Back in, I think it was the 80s, when people started being very concerned about whether the gold was there or not following the Nixon shock, they went on down there and they opened one door to show a stack of bricks and said, you can't touch it, and we're not going to take it out and let you test it. Just take our word for it. The gold is all there. And that was it. And it was all for show. And we don't really know. We covered this in the Gold Conspiracy on History Channel's America's Book of Secrets. We don't really know how much gold the U.S. has. We don't know where any of it's gone. All the gold that Gaddafi had collected to back the gold dinar, which actually was going to have actual gold in a card. And we don't know where that gold went. We don't know who's grabbing it all. But we have to deal with the reality that Goldfinger may have actually been somebody's instruction manual, that they really did rob Fort Knox of our gold. Because the gold that was in Fort Knox belongs collectively to the American people to be managed responsibly by the U.S. government, and it looks like something went hideously wrong with that. So we don't really know. As far as Canada, I would imagine there's a huge area of Canada that's still very remote, unpopulated. I'm almost willing to bet there's probably a lot of gold up there waiting to be discovered and mined. All right, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I apologize for bouncing around a lot, but there's a lot of new stuff coming on in. And I'm just going to cover it as it comes on in. Now, as you know, Iran has gone up to the UN Security Council to basically complain to the Security Council that the new U.S. sanctions violate the P5+1 deal. And, of course, Iran is trying to play by the rules, and the Security Council will be unable to do anything because Nikki Haley will get up there and scream veto, 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 veto. Syria is now up at the United Nations asking for the UN to condemn the U.S.-led coalition for killing civilians in Syria, of which they have killed a very large number. And again, a reminder that the so-called U.S.-led coalition does not have the permission of Syria's government to be in there. They certainly have not been invited. So when you fly warplanes into somebody else's country and you start killing people, that's an act of war. And again, the Security Council won't be able to do anything because Nikki Haley will be up there with her cheerleader skirt and her little pom-poms going, veto, 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 give me a V, give me an E, give me a T, give me an O. Apparently, Europe is responding to the signing of these new sanctions, basically saying Jean-Claude Juncker is up there saying, if any of these sanctions hurt European interests, the EU will respond within days. Germany is already talking about retaliatory sanctions against the United States. And sooner or later, that's going to become a trend. These other countries who are tired of just being tinkered with all the time by the U.S., they're going to start saying, all right, we're going to sanction you. We don't want to do business with you anymore. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Seymour Hersh is out with an FBI document that confirms Seth Rich was the leak from the DNC to WikiLeaks. Russia had nothing to do with it. I questioned Seymour Hersh's assumption that Seth Rich's murder was unconnected with that. Jerome Corsi is now out with a different take from InfoWars, saying that Seth Rich's murder was a sanctioned CIA hit. And if you remember how tightly connected the CIA is with the Clintons and the Bushes going all the way back to 1980s Arkansas and that gun and drug running operation out of the MENA and other airports, it makes sense the CIA would be moving to protect Hillary Clinton, because if she goes down, she'll take them all down with her. Yeah, we murdered Vince Foster. Yes, we brought tons and tons of cocaine into the country and sold it to your children. That famous cackle of hers, as it were. Now, we put up a video on whatreallyhappened.com where Representative Steve King, Republican from Indiana, basically addressed Congress last Thursday in support of legislation that requires the Attorney General to turn over documents regarding former FBI Director James Comey's involvement in various controversial issues, including Obama, Clinton, Soros, Lynch, and others. So there are some people in Congress who are trying to move forward on this. Now, getting on back to the Imran Awan case, indications have surfaced that apparently when Imran Awan's wife fled the country to Pakistan last March, authorities were ready to arrest her at the Dulles International Airport. And apparently, James Comey and McCabe blocked the arrest. They were all set to grab her, and they were told, let her go. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is out there talking tough about Korea. I think they're signaling that the bomb them now faction may be winning, despite what Tillerson said earlier in the day. And McMasters is out there saying Kim Jong-un should not be sleeping easily at night. And apparently the U.S. is claiming that they had a sniper positioned to kill Kim Jong-un at one of the previous missile tests. And now they're claiming that he's got body doubles surrounding him, which might be an appropriate thing to do, if he can find anybody that weighs that much. Now, as you know, the Cal exit is back in the news again. And apparently Tucker Carlson was interviewing one of the people who are driving this forward to see split California in two. And there was a very interesting admission by this gentleman who is trying to push the Cal exit forward, saying they want the new separate Northern California to not have a middle class. They want to replace the middle class with illegals. In other words, they're going to create a new state that is basically going to be turned over to the illegal immigrants. And Tucker was a little bit confused by this, and I think we all are. Okay, now, let's see. I have to look at this over the commercial break. Interesting little study at the University of California, San Diego. It was a 30-year study. They've been doing this, and they just wrapped it up and issued the report, and they discovered that people who are 65 and older, who are heavy drinkers, are more likely to live to the age of 85 without dementia. And boy, did I pick the wrong week to quit drinking. Is all I can say there. Because I'm going to be 65 end of this month. And apparently non-drinkers just fell apart much more quickly. Apparently it was such a strong correlation. There isn't any doubt. So bottoms up, people. We'll be right back after these few commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I just got a very interesting email from one of the listeners. Says that caller should go to China and take a look at reality on the ground regarding those poor workers. Many jobs come with accommodation and meals, besides the cost of living is much lower. If the people are so poor, why are there so many Chinese students around the world and so many Chinese shoppers at the world's high-end malls? The caller has a false impression, methinks, but that's okay. Well, most of what he thinks he knows about China came from the same people who told us all Saddam had nuclear weapons. And a little personal anecdote. Back in 2008, I took Claire to the World Choir Games. It was the first time they were held in the U.S., in Cincinnati. And while we were there, there were like over a dozen choirs from China, and they were just absolutely amazing. And they had these fabulous costumes, and we got to talk with some of them. Most of them actually spoke very good English. In fact, better English than we find on the streets of America in most cases. And they didn't look like they were struggling or poor or anything. And we got a very positive, very favorable impression of China sharing time with these people. Again, you've got to be very, very careful. Most of what you think you know about the world is absolute garbage. Fed to you by ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, Fox, CNN, because that's their job, to convince you that our nation is still the greatest on earth and all these other nations are just these hideous squalor and poverty and you would never want to go there. And I remember back in the 1980s when I finally got to travel and see a great deal of the world. It wasn't what I expected based on what I'd been taught in school and been seeing on TV and movies here in the United States of America. Just look at some of those Chinese cities and how beautiful and modern they are compared to our cities, which are just crumbling into ruin right now. Yeah, I think that caller has sort of an oversimplistic view of reality of life in China here. Now then, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with computers. Google is launching a new program to track shoppers through facial recognition and ties your behavior to your purchases in the brick and mortar stores. It's just like out of the beginning of Minority Report. They're not scanning your eye, they're scanning your face, but otherwise it's the same thing. As you pass kiosks, they're going to flash ads for things they think you want. When you go into a store, you'll be greeted by name. But a lot of people are very upset, and there's actually a federal privacy complaint over this because people don't want to be tracked by corporations. They don't want their buying habits to be analyzed. And more importantly, people will sometimes take a look at something that just catches their eye, and it doesn't necessarily mean they want to buy it or more like it. And so very often the advertising becomes annoying because you're getting ads for the same thing over and over and over again that you have no interest in. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go right to the phones. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. Good day to you. Yeah, Michael, I was watching this new press secretary in with Huckabee talking about immigration today, and they just had a thing on Newsmax TV that there was 2,338 murders in Mexico in the month of July, in only 1 month. And I was saying to myself, okay, that's Mexico, the whole country. I wonder how many in the month of July the United States has in all the big cities in this country. I wonder what that statistic on that is.
Well, I don't have that number close at hand, but, I mean, look at what's going on in Detroit. I mean, they're certainly the trend setter in gunning people down. Thank goodness they have strict gun laws up there.
No, that's Chicago, Michael. Chicago.
You're right. That's Chicago.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. All the in Baltimore, Philadelphia, L.A., but this guy was talking today about immigration, and one guy was talking about, the Statue of Liberty. And I was saying to myself, no, the Statue of Liberty shouldn't be holding a torch. What the Statue of Liberty should be doing right now is shooting a bird at everybody saying to keep out, not holding the torch up. It's crazy what's going on here. And they were just talking right now, Michael, and this is very, you need to archive this. The guy was on Newsmax was talking about the labor pool of all these illegals, immigrants that come here do produce picking, strawberries and all that. And there's only 780,000 people actually doing the work in the whole country for agricultural purposes. So what are the rest of these millions of people doing? I mean, and I guess maybe we'll throw in a couple 100,000 doing cutting lawns. But say you get 1 million people doing all these labor jobs in construction. What are these other 8, 9, 10, 20 million illegals doing? And what about the health care for all these people, Michael?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a problem. Most of these refugees and illegal immigrants are unable to find work. I have to look back at the hiring numbers where they're saying most of the jobs created last month were in the service sector, and wonder how many of those were taken by refugees rather than American citizens. And
exactly,
this push toward globalism and open borders is causing all kinds of disruption all over the United States and Europe, and I'm not surprised we're starting to see people push back.
Well, yeah, and yes, Michael, you're absolutely right, but that's not counting the legal immigrants or like these Syrians and these Somalis and all they're bringing in here. What are these people doing? They're bringing them here. They sponsor. Did I have jobs like in Minnesota? They're bringing all these Somalians who are Muslim. What are these people doing in Michigan? They want to bring in Sharia law. What is going on here? And who's behind this insanity?
Well, George Soros.
Myself, Michael, of course. Why doesn't George Soros take them into Israel? Let's take all these people there and Somalians and all that going to Israel.
Israel has to preserve its racial purity. this whole idea of blending everybody together. That's for the rest of the world. That's for the Goyim.
I think Soros should be locked up. Interpol should get him and lock him up for treason against the world. He should be held against treason. There must be a world law that what he's doing to the world is absolutely despicable.
Well, he's actually in violation here in the United States. He violated the USA Patriot Act, encouraging violence to change the political climate with all of his backing of Black Lives Matter and the rest of it.
Right. And, Michael, their slogan is resist, or hate, resist, hate, whatever these schmucks are doing. But that guy Soros is behind that. He should be locked up. I don't know why Trump doesn't target him. Forget that Russian crap. He should be going after him. And look at this Maxie Waters lives in a $400,000, $500,000 home. She has like $100,000, $200,000 car collection. You got Bernie Sanders got 3 homes in Connecticut. I mean, this is unbelievable. And then you got, like you say, you got Soros. This guy is a billionaire trying to disrupt the world balance. This guy should be locked up, put in prison, and throw the key away. Like, look at this guy's worse than Napoleon. This Soros.
Yeah. Well, actually, what Soros reminds me of, there was a Michael Caine movie, and we're going back a couple of decades, called $1 Billion Brain. And the
I remember it, Michael.
Yeah.
I remember the movie.
Well, Soros reminds me of the billionaire who was out there trying to start a world war. And again, I don't appreciate George Soros tinkering with my life or tinkering with my country because we did not elect him to any kind of position of authority over us. It's just a simple fact that he's got a big fat checkbook and way too many politicians who are willing to cash those checks.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, you know, that movie was made over 40 years ago, The $1 Billion Brain. That was way, way back. That movie was made back.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me how old I really am.
I know, Michael. I'm the same age, probably. Well, I got brother. You know, I got family. My family's been in this country for hundreds of years. But anyway, the point of the matter is, you know, going back to Soros, it's not only Soros. They had a thing on the TV the other day. They were talking about. I think it was one of the radio shows. We're talking about how the Rothschilds literally said we paid for Israel to come in existence. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah, I did. I did see that one. Well, I mean, the Rothschilds wanted their own country to basically have a base they could operate out of where the laws were totally in their favor. If you go back and you look at the early history of Tripoli, it was known to be a pirate kingdom. A bunch of pirates got together, bought themselves a country, and it was their safe haven while they predated on the rest of the world.
Yeah, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Exactly. That's where that came from.
Exactly. Right. So, but, you know, Michael, what's going on with this immigration and what they're trying to do with Trump with the Russian thing, it's a mind-blowing to me. And you got this Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz smashing the guy that she had hired. He's smashing phones and all that. And you know what, Michael, one more thing and I'll let you go. I know you got other callers. This guy, I tell you, if you ever look into the brain of that guy, Anthony Weiner, what he must have saw on Hillary's server would blow your mind, him and Uma. They must have so much filth on her that I don't know if the Israelis, somebody's protecting Weiner. Somebody's protecting this guy.
Well, it's basically this overlapping web of blackmail. They don't want to touch Anthony Weiner because he can bring down Hillary Clinton. They don't want to touch Huma Abedin. Same reason. Everybody's blackmailing everybody else. And the first person to make a deal and break loose from that, it's all going to start unraveling. And I've heard a lot of rumors, which I cannot confirm, about some of the things that were on Huma's laptop in terms of compromising Hillary and Huma and a third party. So
don't forget Seth Rich. Don't forget Michael. Seth Rich was probably there was an inside scoop of the Clintons against Seth Rich. So all I can say, Michael, you have a great show. And one more thing. Look at Danny Williams Clinton. How come that's never been on? Can you imagine that on Maury Povich? How many billions of people worldwide would watch that with Bill Clinton and Danny Williams doing a DNA swab on the Maury Povich show for 5 minutes?
Yeah, but again, the CIA is protecting Bill Clinton along with Hillary Clinton, and the CIA has tremendous control over the media. So it's not going to happen. It's like when that documentary about the Franklin scandal came on out, and they literally threatened, I forget who was going to carry it, the channel that was going to carry it. It was already in the TV guide, and they yanked it, and some unknown party bought all the VHS copies of the tape. And the only reason we know that it ever existed was there was an editing work tape that escaped the pogrom, as it were, and that's where all of the copies on YouTube originated. Anyway, Tom, we're going to let you go here. We're going to let.
All right, Michael. Have a great show.
All right, we're going to let you go. And yeah, that Michael Caine movie. I mean, every time I see George Soros, he reminds me of that billionaire just spending his money to make the world what he wants. And in the movie, it was war with Russia, which seems to be on the way. And obviously, Soros is pushing for the one world government. And I guess that movie was made 40 years ago because I remember there's actually a scene in there where they show one of those shoe store fluoroscopes, which proved to be such a problem for the shoe store clerks because it was giving them all cancer. But it's part of an important story point inside the film itself. And I actually got to meet Michael Caine one time when he was working on the island, and they were doing the interiors at Universal. He's a very cool guy. I really enjoyed hanging out with him. And it's funny because he plays these villains in so many movies. But he's actually a very cool guy. And he had a very interesting way of handling his career. He would do one for the money, then he would do the next one for the art, then he would do the next one for the money, next one for the art, which I think was a good way of handling it. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go on back to the phone. Fred in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Today, on AccuWeather, there is a expose, Earth Overshoot Day. We've just exhausted a year's worth of the planet's resources. Never heard of Earth Overshoot Day, previously known as Ecologic Debt Day. And this guy by the name of Dr. Mathis Walker-Nagel, CEO of the Global Footprint Network and co-creator of the Ecologic Footprint. All right. So I got to ask you, Mike, CEO of Global Footprint Network, what's that all about? Co-creator of the Ecologic Footprint, and here's what he says. The Ecologic Footprint, which he co-created in the 90s, is the only metric that measures how much of nature's resources we, you and me and the audience, have used up. Okay? Let me continue quickly here. All right, he says humanity's demand is 70% faster than what Mother Earth can renew. Humans need the equivalent of 1.7 Earths to accommodate our current consumption level. Okay? Now here's a woman, Catherine Kellogg, who says we're borrowing time, we're going into debt, borrowing resources from the future to sustain our way of living, to fulfill our consumption. Okay? Now, I got to go to solutions for a sustainable future. Mm-hmm. And here's what she said. She says we're going to start seeing things decline, whatever that is, and seeing the price of things shoot up because there's not enough supply to meet our demand. Mm-hmm. And she's referring to the fact that Americans consume 25% of the planet's coal, 26% of its oil, 27% of its natural gas. Okay? So she says those things are going to decline and the price of those things are going to skyrocket, she says. Now, here's what this guy Walker-Nagel says. Solutions for a sustainable future. Having resources secured is for ability to operate our Walker.
Okay, our phone connection seems to be deteriorating all of a sudden, so let me just come on in here. Given that these all started in the 1990s, which was about the same time Al Gore was starting to crank up his global warming, this sounds like one of these organizations that's out there with sensationalist claims to do fundraising or sell products, books, and movies and things. That being said, I understand that the human population is growing rapidly out of control, and it always will because sex is a lot more fun than dying. My concern always is that everyone who's a population control advocate always wants somebody else to give up their life or give up having children. And that, to me, is arrogant beyond the extreme. As far as the oil and gas is concerned, yeah, that definitely is finite. there could be a huge amount down there. And I'm basically in agreement with the abiotic origin of oil. It's not decayed dinosaurs, and deep crust microbes are creating new petroleum in the deep crust, but they're not able to create it at the rate that we're using it up. And I think we're long overdue to abandon the oil-based economy and move on to something else. And it distresses me that outside of token efforts to be politically correct, there isn't a real serious research project looking at all of this. And that's why we have all these electric cars out there that everybody thinks are environmentally clean, not realizing the electricity that you're putting into that battery is still being produced by fossil fuels. So, but it looks like this group is more exaggeration and hype. And if you go over to my ClimateGate page, you're going to read all these quotes by these people who openly say, yes, of course we're lying. We've got to scare people into going along with our agenda. And this sounds an awful lot like more of the same.
Yeah. All right. Have to check it out. And I agree with you, Mike. You know, somebody on Coast to Coast, there was some scientist in Arizona who was able to utilize one of Tesla's, it was some sort of a plasma technology capturing sunlight, and the guy actually had a functioning automobile. He was driving around just by harnessing the energy from the sun.
Well, you know, at some point, if the real blockade is the efficiency level of inexpensive solar panels, and it's only about 30-40%, and there have been some very tantalizing developments at increasing that, but the cost-benefit ratio really isn't there. What is needed is a breakthrough that allows solar panels to be closer to 100% efficient in their conversion, and at that point, it really will become practical, along, of course, with continuing improvements to battery technology. And lithium did look like it had potential, but unfortunately, they're continuing to show serious instabilities to the point where for home battery backup systems, many places are now mandating the batteries are actually to be kept outside the residence in their own little shed in case they do explode. So there's an issue there. But what I want to know is, knowing that the oil and gas is running out and knowing that we have these other issues, why is there not a Manhattan Project scale research program underway to actually find what that next thing is going to be? Hot fusion, cold fusion, improved efficiency solar. We know that there are a lot of things that are technologically possible. Right now, our government seems to not have the political will to do it. Their solution to everything is to go on out and nuke some other country.
Michael, I got to tell you, Stanton Friedman, you know who Stanton Friedman is, right?
Yep.
Okay. I heard it several times. He's been on Coast to Coast, many times. This man worked diligently in the 50s and the 60s, and he said adamantly that they had perfected fusion propulsion engines, not fission, fusion. Okay? It was controlled. Look what they did to Pons and Fleshman with their cold fusion experiments. And all I got to say is, Nexus magazine out of Australia, that marvelous science magazine, back in 2002, I had a subscription. There was a guy, Al Caggiano in Boston, who was an HVAC specialist. He reconfigured or adapted his patented condenser system so that he could use it on his neighbor's 86 Mercedes diesel. 162 miles per gallon. Okay, 162.
Okay, I want to back up. I want to back up to Pons and Fleischmann, because first of all, we know that they did find something that produced heat beyond the break-even point. I think their big mistake was declaring it to be cold fusion, because we didn't find the byproducts we would expect from a true fusion reaction. But something was going on, and somebody did pay a huge amount of money to the university where they worked for those patents. And then the media came on out and said, oh, there's nothing there, go back to using your oil and gas. But there have been a lot of people working with the cold fusion around the world, including the U.S. Army's own research lab. And they still don't know exactly what's going on. They only know that it does, in fact, work, that once you get the thing built and to a certain state, when you put electricity into it, you get far more heat out of it than you should, and that excess heat can be turned back to electricity, and it's past the break-even point here. Anyway, listen, we're coming up on a commercial break, and I'm going to let you go because we're running out of time on the show, and I got a bunch of stuff to talk about. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, there's some interesting technologies out there. There's also a lot of fraud. There's also a lot of hoaxes, get-rich-quick schemes, things that sound good but don't really pencil out. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take a phone call. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I'm in the southwestern corner of Iowa here, and I'm at the top, the very top of the path of totality for the thing on the August 21st, the eclipse.
Yeah.
But anyway, that night, the 21st, I usually go down to Kansas City anyway for to participate in a musical activity down there, the third Monday. So I guess I'll be driving right through that on the interstate during the that.
Okay, well, you probably ought to be ready for a lot of traffic jams because you're going to have a significant part of the U.S. population and a lot of people from other countries jammed into that corridor of totality. And already,
I think if they're going to choose someplace to go, they're not going to go here to St. Joseph and this area here. So St. Joseph, Missouri, is trying to get a lot of people to come. They're trying to make a big deal out of it, but. I mean, they're not going to come here in August. It's real hot. If they have a choice, they're going to go, to Oregon or someplace.
Well, okay, I certainly hope you're right. And if I were anywhere in the area, I would certainly be going because seeing a total eclipse for real is on my bucket list here. But, good.
Well, it just happened that I went into a senior center today to play pool, and the lady there gave me one. She asked me if I wanted a pair of eclipse glasses. She just gave it to me. So I guess maybe they're giving them away to seniors. If some of the people here, your audience, are over the age of whatever they call it there. It looks like they're giving them away to old people. Maybe. She just gave me those glasses.
They're very inexpensive. The ones that are cardboard and mylar are very inexpensive, and the mylar ones are good. But you do need to be very, very careful. We had this story last week where apparently some of the people selling eclipse viewing glasses on Amazon, the glasses are not actually safe because they're not blocking the UV light. So you need to be looking at that.
These are the cardboard ones that. She said they're certified, is what she said.
Oh, okay, yeah. There's a lot of those out there, and they're very inexpensive. Another way that you can do it, if you don't want to risk looking at the sun directly through glasses, is you make yourself a little pinhole camera as a solar observatory, just out of a cardboard box, a sheet of white paper, and a piece of tinfoil with a pinhole in it. And I remember when I was a kid in New Hampshire, and we were very close to a total eclipse, that's how we watched it. Was through this little pinhole camera arrangement.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that too, yeah. But can you get good pictures then? Photographs of something? They say there's streaks also somewhere.
Well,
colorful streaks or something?
Well, you're talking about the corona and everything. Getting a picture, it's very dicey because you're aiming your camera directly at the sun. And not all CCDs are able to withstand that. On the other hand, if once it becomes total, then you can tip the camera up and take a bunch of exposures at different exposure times. But be sure and have the camera lens turned away before the sun comes through on the other side, or you could damage the device.
Okay, well, And what if it's raining, though? Then the whole
well,
thing
then you're out of luck, and that's a risk anybody who's chasing eclipses has to face. In fact, when Einstein devised an experiment to prove his theory of general relativity that required a total eclipse, and the first expedition they sent got rained out. And it was years and years because of the interference from the war. It was years and years until they were able to repeat the experiment, and then they did, in fact, confirm that Einstein's prediction was correct.
But to be honest with you, I'm not really usually enthusiastic about this kind of thing. But since I'm going there anyway. I'm going right through it, just on my regular scheduled event. So.
Oh yeah, target of opportunity and everything. Like I said, if I was anywhere near the path of totality, I'd be loading Claire into the car, and we'd be heading on up there as well. And for anybody who's planning on going to the path of totality, there could be traffic jams. There probably will be traffic jams. Take along storable food and water, because you may not even be able to get to a store. Make sure your car is the gas tank is topped off before you even get close to there. Okay?
Okay, thanks for that, Mike.
It's going to be a zoo, and Oregon is already saying they're expecting massive, massive traffic problems out there. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at Fox News, and they're running this story about the Northwest heat wave and how hot it's getting over there. Well, think about all the stories about all the out-of-control wildfires out there. Of course, it's going to be a little bit warmer. But they're still out there pushing human-caused global warming. They're trying to desperately get people to go see Al Gore's mockumentary Inconvenient Sequel, and it's amazing. There were all these glowing reviews. He's going to save the planet. He's the new Messiah, and hardly anybody's showing up to buy the tickets, and I certainly don't intend to waste my time with that either. But that's their job. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about ClimateGate further in the program here, but right now it's time to talk about computers. And apparently Great Britain is literally going on the warpath against tech companies over the message encryption problem. And the new spiel coming on out is that normal people don't care about encryption. They're more interested in the features, and anybody who's involved in wanting to secure their messages obviously is up to something no good, and that's why we have to ban encryption. No, actually, we want our encryption so that third parties, man-in-the-middle attacks, aren't snarfing out our banking details or personal details of our life with which to do us harm, and that's a very real danger. And don't forget, here in the United States, and I'm sure probably other governments as well, government agents will steal your business information for their own profit. And we have a right to privacy. That's what that Fourth Amendment is all about. Apparently, Amber Rudd is still out there on the warpath there, and technical experts are saying that it's obvious she's technologically illiterate, like most politicians out there trying to pass laws about things they have absolutely no knowledge of. Now, back in 2014, as you know, Edward Snowden revealed the National Security Agency and GCHQ could turn on your smartphone remotely even when you had turned them off. And Snowden basically said, if you want to make sure you're not being spied on, if you're having wild sex with your significant other, remove the battery from the phone. And ever since then, smartphone manufacturers have gone to having non-removable batteries. Now, one thing about Claire's Samsung, it was possible to replace the battery, which was a good thing because the batteries didn't last that long. I think we put 3 batteries through that thing. But obviously, our new iPhones and iPads, you can't replace the battery. And yeah, it's very alarming that these spy agencies are using your appliance to spy on you. And again, it's not about crime and terror. I mean, look how completely out of control cybercrime has gone. And they're not doing a thing about it. Look how the NSA completely missed the Awan brothers literally spying on everybody in the House of Representatives. What the heck were they doing over at NSA? Going through their personal porn collection that they've snarfed off of everybody's computers? Which Edward Snowden says, yeah, they're doing that too. So we do have a right to privacy, and if the government will not respect that, we have to take responsibility for it ourselves. And there are various products out there where if you need a moment of privacy, you can turn off your phone and put it into these cases that are Faraday shields, and the NSA will not be able to reach the phone, hence not turn it on. Or you can leave the phone in another room or something. But human beings have a need for a sense of privacy. Every time I get somebody who comes up and says, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, why are you so worried about privacy? And my reply to that would be, the next time you're making love to your spouse, are you okay with the fact that the NSA and GCHQ could be peeking in? Are you really that devoid of any kind of a sense of outrage here? There are times when we want to be private, and it doesn't mean we're doing something illegal. It doesn't mean that we're terrorists. Over at Natural News, they have a story. Meet Tally, the grocery store shelf auditing robot that is going to put thousands of low-wage grocery workers out of a job. And basically, this is a robot that will go down the aisles in the supermarket and see what products are there in order to automatically place orders for replacement products and possibly to restock the shelves. And check for pricing errors. And these are things that store clerks tend to do. And again, I'm a big fan of science and technology when it works. Still can't get Claire's iTunes to recognize her Outlook. But somebody has to realize that the more and more you put people out of work, the fewer and fewer customers you have that are going to be able to buy the products you're selling. I mean, to me, it is so incredibly obvious this is a problem. And it boggles the mind that nobody in the world of business, the bankers, the economic planners, and the government don't see it. Or they don't care. There's a new keylogger malware for Android. It's called the Invisible Man. And apparently it is installed by a dodgy Flash update. When you go around the web and it says your Flash needs to be updated, do not click that link. That is a favorite method for planting malware on your website. And apparently there's another one out there. It is called SVPENG. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, which is also another keylogger feature that will steal all of the information off your Android phone. It's open season on you and your devices. Now, the NSA justifies its incredible budget, saying that they're here to protect the nation's IT infrastructure. It would be nice if they were actually able to do it, but clearly they are not. The more money they spend on these spy agencies to give them a capability to monitor our electronic devices, the worse the cybercrime problem becomes. Maybe what we need to do is go the other way and start slashing their budgets, and maybe the cybercrime problem will vanish. Because it's very common with government. They'll say, oh, there's a problem. We give you a little money. Oh, the problem's got worse. We'll give you a little more money. Oh, the problem's really out of control. Let's go the other way. Now we're going to talk about ClimateGate. Once again, fraud has surfaced in the reporting of temperature data. This is down in Australia. Scientists at the Bureau of Meteorology ordered a review of temperature recording instruments after the government agency was caught tampering with temperature logs in several locations. Angry officials admit the problem with instruments recording low temperatures likely happened in several locations throughout Australia, but they refuse to admit that they're manipulating the data, even though what they're doing is saying, oh, this temperature is way too cold. We've got to raise it. Meteorologist Lance Pigeon says there was a 13-degree Fahrenheit Goulburn recording from July 2nd. It simply vanished from the Bureau of Meteorology's website. They're deleting cold temperature records. Remember what they did here in the U.S. back in the 1990s? They started closing down all the temperature measuring stations in the remote, cool, rural parts of the country, and based the entire claim of warming temperatures on temperature stations located in cities, which are far hotter places. It's the urban heat island effect. We have photos of these official NOAA temperature stations in the outflow of building air conditioning systems. We have one located next to a trash incinerator. Gee, I wonder if they're getting a higher reading there. They locate these things in the middle of airports surrounded by jets belching out tons of burning hydrocarbons. Now, they're out there trying to claim that 2016 was the hottest year ever. But during July and August of last year, maximum temperatures at Oklahoma City averaged 13 degrees cooler in 2016 than they did in 1936. Every single day except one was cooler than it was in 1936. The world was actually much hotter in 1936, but you're not supposed to know about that. Because the world was hotter in 1936 and it didn't come to an end. And people didn't have to pay carbon taxes. They didn't have to buy carbon credits. We all survived. Over at the New York Times, this is an article, it's a YouTube video we just put up, in fact. On July 28, 2017, the New York Times published a spectacular fake news story about heat waves, where every single one of their facts was inverted from the reality. And it's a 15-minute video, and they just take it apart piece by piece by piece by piece. They're still out there pushing human-caused global warming. And by the way, I don't know about where you live in the country. Here in Hawaii, it's already starting to feel autumnal. I think we're going to have an early, hard winter. Meanwhile, our hurricane season has just been intense, just storm after storm after storm. None of them hit us. Apparently, Hurricane Hillary and Hurricane Greg crossed paths and spun out. There's a new one out there, a hurricane, I think it's Igor or Ivan, something like that, but it's tracking away from us. But we're just getting into the hurricane season, so could be an interesting time. Meanwhile, Al Gore, who basically is do as I say and not as I do, his very extravagant lifestyle in that new home he bought out there on the beach in Southern California, so much for ocean levels rising, his home uses 34 times more electricity than the average U.S. household. He's living a very plush lifestyle. He does not take his own advice. He's out there burning up the electricity, adding to the carbon footprint, because carbon taxes and that sort of, that's just for you, the serfs, the hoi polloi. Now, apparently there's this mayor of an island into Chesapeake Bay, and he got a chance to talk with Al Gore about the fact that the island appears to be sinking into the Chesapeake Bay. And, of course, Al Gore is out there saying it proves ocean levels are rising. And so Tangier Island Mayor James Ooker Eskridge corrected Al Gore and said, no, actually the problem is erosion. The sea level is not rising. Our island is eroding away into the ocean. That's what's going on here. Now, interestingly enough, getting on back to the solar eclipse that's coming on up, there are already people out there that are whining about, oh, what a terrible thing this is. It's part of nature's glory, and it's not like you could do a thing to stop it. But they're out there saying that the eclipse is going to wipe out enough solar energy to power 7 million homes. Oh, the horror, the horror, the horror. So do thunderclouds. Isn't it amazing how many people we have walking around where their entire reason for being, their entire sense of self-identity is always finding things to complain about or be offended by. That's it. I am here to be offended. I am here to find things to complain about. The solar eclipse is bad. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. Tom in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just tuned in. Is it open topics right now?
You're this close to the end of the show, sure. What do you want to talk about?
The governor of Hawaii is attending a groundbreaking of the first Honolulu's first hydrogen station right down there at Servco in Honolulu.
Yeah, we put that story up there. And apparently Servco has actually invested in importing a bunch of these hydrogen-powered cars, and now they're building this facility in order to provide the hydrogen for it. And it actually does sound kind of cool.
If you look on the Google Earth, the facility exists, and it's got solar panels on the roof. So I'm guessing that the electrolyzer will be powered by the solar panels, which means 100% green.
Well, wait a minute. You're assuming that the solar panels are the sole source of electricity for the electrolyzer. They may be contributing, but they may also be taking power off of the grid as well. And again, we have a shopping mall not too far from here, and the anchor client there is a Times Market, and they went solar. They even built solar panels over the parking lot, which makes it a lot cooler to park there, and there are solar panels all over every single building, and it's a very impressive system, but they still have to draw some electricity from the regular grid.
Right. I don't know. I called to try to find out how the specifics of it, and they haven't called me back yet, but I thought you'd find that interesting, and thanks for putting that up on your website there. Hydrogen is the next big thing, Mike.
Well, I agree, but we just have to find a way to power those electrolyzers, without using fossil fuels, whether that's going to be hot fusion or cold fusion. But again, probably the reason you didn't get a reply is they haven't completed the system yet, so they don't actually know what the electric draw will be. And that, of course, is going to fluctuate with demand. At first, it's probably going to be very little demand. But as more and more people buy these cars, and I might even look at one if I could get the money for it, the demand will increase. And again, the fact that it's got solar panels doesn't mean it's only powered by solar power. That's purely an assumption.
But I agree, and I had hoped to have some more details, but like I said, they didn't call back. But if you look at the address on the press release that was sent out down there on Pakalolo or something, if you look at that on Google Earth, the entire roof is covered with solar collectors.
Yeah,
it's on 2850 Pukololoa Street.
Yeah. Okay, I know where that is. Yeah, Pakalolo means marijuana. Anyway, listen, Tom, we're running out of time here. We're going to let you go. And, it looks very cool, and it's nice that Hawaii is at the forefront of developing this technology. But again, just because a building has solar panels all over the top of it doesn't mean it's not also still having to rely in part on the electric grid. So can't jump to conclusions on that one. Okay, let's see. We're going to start with Francis near Spokane, and we're going to probably take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind, Francis?
Well, I'll make it real quick for your astute listeners there. Unless you like the color green, go to your nearest welding supply place, buy a gold number 12 lens and a clear one to go on top of that so you don't scratch the gold. Put the clear part, press that up against the binoculars, the eyepiece, and you can view the eclipse and sunspots with whatever magnification you have.
Actually, you want to put it in front of the objective of the binoculars so that you don't melt the inside of the binoculars.
Okay, well, I'm getting to that part too. I have quality binoculars, but then
Gotta let you go. Gotta let you go. All right, bye-bye. And aloha, America. Welcome to the last segment of our program today. And as long as we're talking about astronomy, a couple of things are coming on up. Right now, we are in the middle of the Perseid meteor shower. It happens this time of year. It's very long, goes from mid-July toward pretty much the end of August, but it peaks August 12th. And astronomers are predicting that this is going to be the most spectacular Perseid meteor shower in the last 120 years. They're predicting it's going to be so intense with so many large meteors, some of them may even show up during the day. And I've only ever seen one daytime meteor. But the best time to watch is going to be in the hours before sunrise, which is easy for me. I'm up before the sun here anyway, and on the 12th I'll be out there with a camera. But they're saying it's going to be very intense, and it will never be this intense again in our lifetimes. And the reason for that is the cloud of debris, the trail of debris, is not uniform. And the debris is most dense along the path of the actual comet itself that has created this trail. And right now, on the 12th, the Earth is going to go right through that center portion, the most dense. And so that's something to look forward to. And, of course, you don't need special glasses to do that. Now, something else to keep you looking at the sky is the Chinese space station Tiangong-1. And it started falling out of orbit last year. It's the size of a bus. China has admitted they have lost complete control of it. So they're not able to direct it to a harmless landing. Now, we're getting the usual thing about, probably nobody's going to get hurt, but then we got that from Skylab. They're not sure when that will come down, but they're thinking it's probably going to be very, very soon. There are satellite tracking web pages that are keeping an eye on where it is. And we had a satellite deorbit over Hawaii here about 4 months back. Came on down, and it happened at night. It was quite spectacular, actually. So that's something else to keep your eyes on. And again, I know we were listening to the music. The gentleman was talking about getting these filter glasses that go in a welder's mask. And they are very good eye protection. But again, put them on the front side of your optical instrument, whether it's a telescope or binoculars. Put them over the objective. Because if you put them on the eyepiece, the problem is the inside of your telescope or binoculars is getting the full blast of the sun being focused down there. And it can cause a lot of damage, especially if there are plastic components. All right, now, we're continuing to see these major protests in Italy against mandatory vaccinations. And the interesting thing is, this is getting no coverage in the corporate media because apparently there is a concern that if the American people realize how angry the Italians are over this, that Americans might start realizing there is a reason to be angry about this. And apparently, there's the music. We'll save the rest until tomorrow. Please stay tuned to John Stadmiller's program. He's coming up right after I get done yakking. And please take what you learn here and on the website, share it with everybody that you know. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.